you're pretty much always going to have social anxiety. Practically speaking, on a lot of levels, you can say that you will overcome social anxiety pretty significantly um, if you have a lot of social experience and you have learned how to deal with the anxiety itself, like as a strategy to the feeling, right? Um, the way it works essentially is the more social experience you get and the knowledge you get, how to handle awkward silences, how to talk to all kinds of people, so that you're not kind of thinking like, oh, how do I handle this situation? Once you're in a lot of situations that you're not used to being in, you kind of cover all your bases and you have a kind of a strategy for dealing with a lot of things. You might occasionally find a situation that's just like, I have no idea what's going on. Like, how do I deal with this person being weird or whatever? But when you've, talked to enough girls, flirted with enough girls, talked to enough guys, had conversations with all sorts of people from every spectrum of personality, you kind of have uh, a strategy in mind that almost might be on autopilot and just come instinctually. And the way that circumnavigates anxiety is that when the feeling of anxiety comes, that feeling won't make you freeze, right? You'll still feel the anxiety, but then you'll just like act on it, right? And so that's one way that you kind of deal with social anxiety, but it doesn't necessarily eliminate it, which is part of what I'm going to try and go over in this video. You're still going to have that feeling, right? You're just going to be able to react in spite of it. But then the second thing that you can maybe help to deal with it is actually have a solution for anxiety itself, right? Which again is going to give you that ability to react to the feeling coming up, especially in those cases where maybe you don't have an autopilot strategy, right? Or you're new, so you don't have any pre-built strategies. And even in those situations, you're not always going to perform. You might have a response, but it might not be ideal, right? You may respond, but then this person hits you with another curveball, and it can be anything. It can be people are being rude to you and you're like, okay, this is usually how I should respond. And then they respond in a way that you're really not, they get aggressive or they make fun of you. And then like everyone laughs at you or something. And then you're like, oh, fuck, I don't know. And then the anxiety starts to compound because you really don't know how to handle yourself. So in those situations, because you can't account for every situation you'll find yourself in, both positive and negative, that's a very negative situation. It could be like a girl, you can tell she really likes you and then you kind of get farther than you thought you would. And then you're in this situation where you're like, I didn't think I'd get this far, and you don't know what to do next because, things are going well, but you haven't accounted for that, right? So positive or negative, you can still have anxiety because anxiety for positive things comes from, this is kind of an insight into what anxiety is itself. You're nervous because you really want it. It's not like something bad's happening, but you're afraid of not pulling it off, right? It's like you're in front of the goal and you have a clear shot on the goal, but you're afraid that you're still going to fucking, launch it into outer space and you're going to completely miss even though the goal is wide open and the goalie is past you, right? So you can have anxiety in even positive situations. So you need a way to actually deal with anxiety itself as an emotion, right? So this is for people who of all levels of social experience, but definitely guys who are maybe on the more inexperienced end. Basically, what I'm going to do in this video, I'm going to speak to you on a very break the fourth wall. I'm going to show you why you'll never get rid of anxiety. So when anxiety does come up, you won't be so anxious about trying to fight it. This is actually a strategy that can help you deal with like anxiety attacks and panic attacks and general anxiety disorder and all spectrums of that, from the mundane to the very extreme, like straight up panic attacks. You think you're dying, right? This is actually pretty much just a strategy for how to deal with that, but focus more on social stuff, but you can take it for anything. But I'm going to tell you to not be so worried. And then when you do get anxious, you're not going to the anxiety is not going to fucking, exponentialize. If that's a fucking word, it's not going to amplify and increase exponentially, because you just have a way of dealing with it, right? So or sorry, you have a way of dealing with it, or if you don't have a way of dealing with it, you're okay with it not being dealt with because you understand that pretty much it'll always be there, right? If you're truly looking for the final solution to anxiety, you have to get enlightened. Like, you have to become an enlightened being, right? Like, an arhat is the term, fully enlightened, like 100%. You take Buddhism to the end, and you did it, right? Unless you do that, you're always going to have anxiety. It's even like in the Buddhist teachings, like anxiety actually is one of the final like fetters. It's called like the final chains that you have to break, and it's not done until pretty much the end. So this is a pretty good argument academically as well, but maybe you're into Buddhism, maybe you're not. But that's the only way you fix it, okay? So until you get fully enlightened, you are going to always fucking have anxiety. So I want you to relax and just accept it, right? But that doesn't, I'm not either trying to give you license to just be, I'm just going to surrender. That's bullshit, okay? There is some goodness within that philosophy, but a lot of times then people open themselves up to the other extreme, right? The two extremes are like you're resisting to things too hard, and then the other extreme is like you just let everything happen and you go fully limp, right? That's how you get, there's a lot of bad things that can happen from fully surrendering as well. Anxiety is normal. It's a normal state of your existence, okay? You're going to have it when, homework is due and you didn't start it until, the night before, a deadline, you have a date tomorrow, you have a big trip tomorrow. Anxiety is just going to come, right? Anxiety is the feeling of stress that arises when you are met with something uncertain, when you're met with uncertainty, right? Because if you have absolute certainty, you are not anxious. Because fear cannot arise because you are certain of what's going to happen, right? Well, I guess in the case where something bad's going to happen and you're certain of it, then anxiety can arise, like, the certainty of your death. Okay, so that's not exactly true in every case, right? I guess if you break that down even further, anxiety is the feeling that arises when you fear an outcome. So even if it's certain or uncertain, right? But the uncertain outcomes, like I'm gonna forget what to say, I'm gonna freeze in the meeting, I'm gonna, my plane's gonna crash, whatever fucking shit is in your head, usually the thing that you're fearing is negative, right? We're not usually fearing the positive things, but I guess there are some weird kind of ways where you can also fear success, but really that's just an extended version of fearing bad things that are gonna happen. But just let's understand what anxiety is by definition, right? It's a feeling. And that feeling is usually associated with some thoughts, right? Or other feelings. And so feelings kind of start to chain together. And this is kind of actually what Buddhism is teaching you. It's teaching you how to break things down on a very, systematic level. You start with the theory, then you have to practice it, right? So this video is not going to solve your issue 100%. You have to actually practice it, right? But anxiety is a feeling that is going to arise. So I have a date tomorrow, for instance, or a meeting or whatever. And you start thinking about potential things that can happen. Those thoughts are then going to trigger feelings, and those feelings are going to arise in your consciousness, and then you're going to start feeling feelings, right? And then that's going to trigger more and more and more and more and more. And you're going to feed it by sitting up, thinking all night, or, if you're in the moment in a conversation and you don't know what to say next, these feelings start, and you start to, everything just kind of starts to go haywire, right? What you need to understand at its base level is that it's just a feeling. That's it, right? There are also the real things that can happen. Like I will forget, something important at the meeting, or I don't know what to say next, and I actually will just sit there and stutter like a retard. Like there's a lot of actual events that can happen, right? But those are events. Those are things happening. They are not actually the feelings and thoughts that you're having. They can be, one can point to the other, right? I have a feeling that I'm going to be awkward in the next 3 minutes or next 3 seconds because I don't know how to respond to what they just said. But that's very different from the actual act of things happening, right? And then them observing that you don't know what to say and then thinking you're a weirdo or whatever actual consequences that happen, right? But they are not actually in reality the same thing. These are feelings and thoughts, and these are maybe like the mirror of it, right? Or the actualization of what's happening, but they are not actually the same thing. So the anxiety and the feeling itself is just a feeling. So we need to face it on that level, right? Because we're assuming that right now we don't have an actual solution, right? This is just how to deal with the anxiety itself, okay? Unless you have a perfect solution, you're going to have it even when you're going to have this feeling of anxiety, even when you do have a potential solution, because you're never 100% sure that that solution, like, oh, I should make a joke, I should say this, or, I'm going to get in a car accident, so, I'm going to wear my seatbelt. Like, you can have all of these strategies to fight the potential fears that you have, but they're never 100%, right? So when you're in a social situation, like I go to a party and I don't know anyone there, and then I'm kind of sitting there in the corner like a weirdo and blah, 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 blah. One potential solution could be, well, I need to go up and talk to someone, right? Because I'm actively making myself the weirdo by continuing to sit here and not say anything to anyone, right? So something that could combat that perception that's being created because I'm actively being a weirdo, which it's true. Like, we have to be honest with ourselves too. We can't just be lovey-dovey hippie fucking bullshitters, right? Oh, it's fine. Everything just flow. Fuck you. Like, you actually have to, take action in life, right? So let's say you have a solution. Like, okay, well, I need to go fucking say something to someone and stop being a social retard. Okay. Hey, what's up, man? And he looks at you and kind of, he looks at you weird. And then you're like, oh my God, I'm already dead, right? Like, he thinks I'm a social retard. That's not necessarily true, right? There's so many variables going on. He could also be fearing the same thing you're fearing, and his look of like discomfort is not actually thinking you're a weirdo. It's him thinking he's a weirdo, right? So the game of socializing is a very funny one, because a lot of times we interpret things negatively, but really it's just someone else having their own negative experience, but then we're connecting it to our own, and we start to like create these weird fucking narratives. But sometimes you are the social retard and everyone thinks you're that. It happens sometimes, right? Like I said, let's not live in fairy tale land. Sometimes you are the weirdo. But the point is, no strategy that you have is always going to be 100% certain. So learning this kind of meta strategy, if you're still with me, maybe I lost half of you, but okay. Right? That's a thought that entered in my head. A thought just entered in my head as I was talking. And the thought was essentially, nobody knows what the fuck you're talking about. You're speaking in ancient fucking Akkadian. And, half the people have already clicked off. They think you're a fucking idiot. Whatever, right? But then I realized that I really have no solution for it outside of, the chain of arguments that I currently have that could potentially teach someone who maybe is following me, right? And it might be like just stupid anxiety on my part, because I think I'm being pretty clear and pretty obvious. Maybe my thinking is sometimes kind of like a web. I've been told that before, and most people kind of think linearly. But I think I'm doing a pretty good job of keeping things simple and not necessarily, it is complicated, but not using language that's, clouding the ideas that I'm having, right? But I had this idea enter into my head, right? But then I just realized, well, all I have is what I can teach you, and it seems to make sense to me, and I seem to be using pretty simple language. There's a pretty good chance that someone's following along. There's also a 100% chance that there's going to be at least one person who watches. If you put 1 million people in front of this video, which is not going to reach 1 million people, but if you put 1 million people in front of this video, there's going to be a 100%, at least one person, but probably a lot of people, who are going to think all sorts of bad things about what I'm saying, right? What the fuck is this guy talking about? Oh my God, this fucking weirdo, da-da-da-da-da, right? I accept that as it's okay. Like, it really does nothing to hurt me, right? Even if every single person on this earth thought this video was retarded, right? It doesn't really hurt me. In actuality, on the level of like feelings of judgment, it might have an impact on like my actual business and stuff, right? Because again, I need people to, want to hear my advice for things to flow, right, for me to be hired. But the actual feelings of everyone like disliking you or, thinking you're weird or whatever it is that your fears of social anxiety are telling you, the kind of voices in your head, those feelings and thoughts only can hurt you if you let them, right? And that's kind of what Buddhism is teaching you, really down at its basic level, right? And this, not trying to make this a Buddhist video, but, I'm just kind of giving some references. Buddhism is trying to teach you that, like, nothing actually really hurts you because you don't care. But that's a completely different subject, but maybe one that you were interested in following. So I have those thoughts enter into my head, and my strategy for that anxiety, those feelings, is, these are just thoughts and feelings, right? If they actually are actualized, if these thoughts and feelings, these momentary kind of gas, because like thoughts and feelings are kind of like gases just arising in your mind, right? If they actually are foretelling the truth, that someone watches this and thinks I'm an idiot and writes a bad comment, I know what that feeling is like because I've had people react to me like that before. I've read those comments before, and I've had it happen in real life, not just, on a comment section, which is like 10 times less bad, right? Okay, has that ever killed me? No. It was just a feeling and just a thought or something I heard, right? But then that created a thought and a feeling, right? Okie dokie smoky baboki, like, it's like, it really isn't that bad, right? So this strategy for dealing with anxiety, social anxiety, or any anxiety, is realizing it really can't hurt you that bad. So what you can do is, whatever you have anxiety about in general, right? This strategy will work with that, or social stuff, right? I'm afraid of being rejected. I'm by a girl if I go up and talk to her. I'm afraid of, confiding in my friends and they think I'm, weak and I'm afraid to be vulnerable, or I don't know, it could be fucking anything, right? Write it down and understand that the fear and the feeling of this bad thing happening, they're not the same thing. You could be right. Your fears could come true, right? But even in that case, like I said, if you really take this teaching further, even if those things happen, your actual experience of them happening at the end of the day are going to be thoughts and feelings. Pretty interesting. Now, the difficult part of this practice is not, like, you might think, oh my God, that's fucking really, maybe it's the opposite. You think what I'm saying is genius. You're like, oh my God, this can help me so much. But when it comes time to practice, right, that's a very different story. That's where you are truly tested, right? And the way you're going to know if you're truly practicing it is whenever that fear comes up, can you act in spite of it, right? So I'm afraid of going to talk to girls. All right, well, go outside, talk to 10 girls. Well, you go to talk to the first girl, the fear comes up, and you're like, oh, it's just a feeling. But then you don't actually follow up and go talk to her. Well, you failed, which is fine, right? Things take practice and time, right? But if you never go talk to the girl, well, then you've been defeated, right? You have been cucked by your thoughts and your feelings. You have been bent over and fucked like a whore. It sucks, right? It happens to all of us, right? The trick is you have to endure the fucking, that the feelings, how they fuck you, right? Oh my God, this hurts, right? It's just pain. And then you have to act in spite of it, right? This is how I dealt with my, I had severe anxiety and panic attacks and anxiety attacks after I was, long story short, not a sob story, actually probably the best thing that's ever happened to me. Well, one of the best things. I was in the capital of Ukraine when the war broke out with Russia and Ukraine, heard tons of explosions, had an artillery shell basically fly over my head. Terrifying, right? Shortly afterwards, had some crazy PTSD, anxiety attacks, panic attacks. Oh my God, I'm going to die. I'm, right. Typical stuff, right? When I was coming up with solutions for how to deal with all of that, there was layers to this that are far beyond the scope of this video, but one of the strongest strategies for actually dealing with, just on the level of I'm having a panic attack right now, I'm having an anxiety attack right now, is this kind of, you can call it a come at me bro strategy. Like, okay, let's go, right? Because when you have anxiety and panic arise in you and You welcome it, not surrender to it. You just welcome it. It's coming. I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to analyze the thoughts, kind of right? And I'm just like fully surrendering. That's just dumb. But I'm opening up to the battle. In fact, I am rushing towards it. I am sprinting with a smile towards the bad feelings instead of no. Because guess what? No is an act of panic, which then creates more panic, right? So if instead of, when I get, a heart palpitation or, this or that, and I start having all sorts of, fears and anxieties crop up, I instead go, oh, okay, cool. Like, this is fun. This is a chance for me to actually fight my anxiety. Go, fuck yeah. Like, give me a panic attack. Now, it didn't always have this level. It had to start of just like, okay, I'll just let it happen. But then as you practice and practice and practice and practice more, then you start getting this kind of confidence, because you start to see, oh, when I accept my panic attack or my social anxiety, or like I said, whatever, when I accept my negative emotions, I see that they fade. Now, you have to kind of do it without the expectation that it's going to fade, because here's how it goes. Oh, I'm going to accept my anxiety, like Hector told me, and I'm going to go talk to girls, or I'm going to go try and make new friends or whatever, right? This guy was so smart. I'm going to accept my anxiety, and it's going to make the anxiety go away. Well, if you're accepting the anxiety, but then kind of secretly underneath, you're like, I hope it goes away, you're still just feeding the anxiety, right? You have to like 100% raw dog, no condom, no lube, or you are using lube, but it's motor oil, and your condom is sandpaper. That's how it's going to feel, right? And you were just like scraping into this like experience, right? And you're sitting there and you're feeling awkward, or you're feeling scared or afraid. And as you're experiencing it, you're really like, if you're hoping that it's going to end, you're not doing it right. If you're really just like, yeah, I'm going to fucking experience this fear and anxiety, just full on, give it to me, baby, then the real result of things calming down will happen. Okay? And once you see that it works that way, you'll become more and more and more and more and more and more confident. Then what's going to happen is you'll create this threshold of like, I can accept this much anxiety on a pretty active basis, because I have proven to myself that I can react to this level of anxiety with the feeling, or with the strategy of, come at me, bro. Like, let's just endure it. And I know it's going to kind of melt it, right? So you have a solution to all these problems. Now, there will be times where you go above your normal threshold, and then you're back to, being scared, right? But the higher a tolerance you build, the better you'll be off. But this doesn't mean that panic and anxiety and fear and whatever is never going to come. That's what I mean by this video or the title of this video is, you're never going to get rid of social anxiety, or you're always going to have social anxiety, right? Unless, like I said, you're an enlightened being, right? Because then it doesn't even arise. You've ripped out the root of it, right? This is just a management program. The higher the tolerance you get, the more autopilot you'll be able to deal with things, right? But then if you rest on your laurels too long, right, and you're not constantly pushing boundaries, then, you tend to slack off, kind of just like being in shape physically, right? You have to also be in shape mentally, and you have to go to the gym. Mentally, you have to put yourself outside of your comfort zone. You have to, test yourself with, not so hard that you break, but then not so little that you become lazy and fat mentally, right? So you always kind of have to be pushing things and keeping yourself, hold yourself accountable. For me, I'm pretty hardcore. Okay, so I'm not going to recommend this to everyone. But there was I had known this was a strategy for anxiety. But essentially, like, my anxieties mostly revolved around dying, right? Because the fear of death was instilled in me because of fucking explosions, right? At any moment I could fucking blow up, right? Because I'm hearing explosions happening around me. And so it's a thought and it's a feeling, right? And could it be actualized? Sure. I was in a fucking war zone, but, Fortunately, it didn't, right? I had good enough karma to not die. So, I had found there was one guy in particular, he was advising the strategy of, when the fear comes up, you just need to accept that you're a pretty healthy person, right? Because it evolved basically into health anxiety, right? I was constantly thinking something was wrong with me. I have this. But even though like I got checked up and nothing was wrong, what this guy was teaching, right? And I know this is going above just social anxiety, but it's still the same process. Basically what he said was, okay, if you get the good bill of health from a doctor, then you have no good reason to have these fears, right? And so it's just an alarm bell system that your body and mind have created because you were put into a traumatic situation. It could have been anything, and then you kind of like are in this new. It's kind of like your alarms are going off at the smallest thing because you got hypersensitized by maybe something traumatic happening to you, right? It could be a near-death experience. It could be you got way too fucking high and, you started having a fucking, what is reality kind of panic attack, anxiety, whatever, right? Drugs, near-death experience, could be anything. And so his strategy was you just need to keep reminding yourself everything's fine. This is just an alarm bell system. I'm a bit fucking hardcore, right? And I'm also a Buddhist. So my strategy is I didn't even allow myself that level of like relief, right? I was like, no, I'm having a panic attack right now. Yeah, I'm going to die. I would actually tell myself, you are going to die. It's going to happen, right? So I would go even more extreme, right? And it was horrible. I would not advise this to most people if you're not ready because you could legitimately go insane. And I did. I definitely was at the brink of anxiety or even over a few times, right? But again, I'm hardcore. So I would tell myself I am dying. So I'm having a panic attack, anxiety, right? And I am going to die. No escape. You need to accept it. If you want to train, if you want to train raw dog, come at me, bro mentalities when it comes to anxiety, that is a very good way to do it. Because I promise you, it made me really strong, right? I haven't had an anxiety in a long time, or a panic attack in a long time. I actually almost had one yesterday. Randomly something happened, and I started to feel the feelings again. And I kind of started to maybe go into bad autopilot because it hadn't happened in a long time. Because I'd built up this huge fucking tolerance to panic and anxiety. Because not only am I doing this practice, I've also overcome a lot of social anxiety because of all the ways I pushed myself socially. Going to talk to girls, meeting random people, talking in front of people, being on YouTube. Like, I'm constantly pushing myself, right? So I've seen the positive effects of this exposure therapy, right? So not only do I have practice in terms of my, spiritual practice but social practice and just combining everything, I know that this strategy works, right? So even with all that good experience though, because I haven't had a lot of this anxiety and panic come up recently because I've built up such a good tolerance, I did also get out of practice, right? So yesterday I kind of had a few minutes where I was going back into old habits because I hadn't practiced in a while. And then I was like, oh, wait a second. I know this doesn't work, right? I need to go into it. So I put a smile on my face and I just started, I used my imagination a lot. I imagined myself like walking into a battle, right? And walking straight into a huge army that's going to come kill me. And just like, come on, let's fucking go, right? And it fucking disappeared within like 15 seconds. And I just laughed and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot. I got to remember that strategy. Because you're doing the opposite of panicking, right? So whatever you have an anxiety about, right? You're in a room of new people and you're afraid to talk to them. You see a pretty girl and your heart starts to pound because you think she's so beautiful, and then you're thinking about going to talk to her. You're afraid to have that talk with your partner that you don't really want to have. You want to ask for a raise at your job. You have problems. 100% guarantee you have a problem in your life. And a lot of it usually involves other people. And so the solution at some point is probably going to involve talking to other people. There you go. That's social anxiety right there. Almost every one of you has it, right? Even people who are really good. Here's a secret. what I'm saying in this video, the title, like, you're always going to have social anxiety, it's true. And even the people who you think are, like, at the top, right? It could be anyone, some cool guy that you know. It could be, you think these celebrities and this and that. Bro, they all have social anxiety. They might even have it worse than you. But they get kudos because they still choose to be in front of the camera or on the stage despite them having social anxiety, right? So, give them a clap for that. You might dislike everything about them, but the fact that they're trying, gets a little bit of an applause, right? So, yeah, they aren't free from social anxiety. In fact, possibly the opposite, right? So get this out of your head that you're never going to have social anxiety. You're always going to have those feelings. Question is, are you going to have the defense system built up? And the defense system is what I've just explained to you in probably way too much detail, right? Because I really don't have a lot of anxiety and fear anymore. But remember, what I mean by that is not that I don't get these feelings. I do. But I'm really, really good at dealing with them. And if I find myself in a situation where I am not good at dealing with them, I have a system for dealing with that. Because it's the same system. Just go into it. Right? I promise you'll be okay. I haven't had a situation. A thought and a feeling will never kill you. A heart attack might kill you. An artillery shell might kill you. But a thought and a feeling will never kill you. But if you really go into the teachings, right, you'll actually find out that that is precisely the only thing that is killing you. Because you continue to be afraid of things. And that is perpetuating the cycle of craving and stress, which is actually why you are being reborn constantly and then why you are dying as a result, right? So if you really want to get deep with this shit, actually the only enemies are feelings and thoughts, or that's where the enemy is hiding behind. But we're getting way beyond the scope of this video, but it's a little wink, and I don't know if that was a good wink or not. Sometimes I'm really good at it, sometimes I'm not, right? For the scope of this video, it's good enough, right? The thoughts and the feelings are not going to kill you, okay? It doesn't really matter. Like, all these fears, all these things you have, like, they're not as big of a deal as you think they are. And I say this as someone who's on the same side of the shore as you and dealing with the same stuff as you, right? I'm not enlightened and crossed over to the other side. But I have seen enough to know that what I'm saying is very true. Okay? Especially with regards to the social stuff. Okay? And I do want to make a video on this. And basically it'll be like, it doesn't matter if everyone hates you. It doesn't matter if everyone thinks you're a loser. Okay? It matters on a practical level because you want success, right? You want to have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or you want to have friends or a good relationship, right? On a practical level, yes, it does matter, right? Because if everyone hates you, then you're not having the thing that you want, which is social success. But, ironically, the obsession over people, wanting people not to hate you, is actually one of the most powerful ways to make people hate you. Because if you're able to have this kind of come at me bro mentality and you practice enough, you will be much more calm and relaxed than most people. And you'll be able to then get experience to create those kind of strategies that you deal with so many social situations where in fact you will be a really cool, charismatic, talkative, whatever person. And you won't find yourself in a lot of situations where you do freeze up because of social anxiety, because you've just seen it and done it all, right? And then if you do run into a situation you haven't, guess what? You have the strategy to deal with anxiety. So kind of, hopefully you're getting what I'm putting down. But I can understand if you didn't, because the way I talk is sometimes really weird. But anyways, I've probably gone way over time. We're at almost 35 minutes, so catch you guys later. I'm going to go make that video right now after I stop this video. So love you. Good luck. Bye.